I've got some troubling news about England's royal family.
One quiet signature changed everything. Without a public announcement, without a family meeting, and without Princess Charlotte being told, several of Diana's most treasured personal heirlooms were removed from the trust created to protect her inheritance. When William discovered the transfer, he did not send an aide or request a formal explanation. He went directly to Charles, carrying the order that had transformed a private family promise into the monarchy's most painful confrontation. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William expected a routine insurance review when the sealed inventory reached his desk. Instead, one cold phrase stopped him: beneficiary entitlement withdrawn. The trust, a legal arrangement protecting property for Charlotte until adulthood, no longer guaranteed her Diana's sapphire brooch, engraved bracelet, pearl earrings, handwritten keepsake letters, or small diamond pendant. He read the page twice, closed the file, then asked whether Charles had personally approved it. The answer broke something inside him. William was not reacting as the future king. He was reacting as Diana's son and Charlotte's father. Those pieces were not decorations. They carried memory and a promise that his mother's love would reach a granddaughter she never lived to meet. Now palace authority had turned that promise into controlled property, and no one had consulted him. Charles knew his son was coming. The king sat alone, placed his reading glasses beside the signed amendment, and told the aide outside that nobody was to enter. He did not pace or call for advice. His stillness made the truth more troubling. The monarch had expected this moment from the second he signed. Then William found the detail that changed anger into alarm. The heirlooms had not merely been scheduled for transfer. They had been removed from the private trust vault 48 hours earlier and taken to a crown-secured archive beneath Windsor. The royal collection, the body-preserving objects connected to the monarchy, now controlled access. Reversing the move would require more than an apology. William checked every other inheritance arrangement. None had changed. Only Charlotte's trust had been stripped, meaning the decision targeted her future, not general security. He entered Charles's private room, placed the inventory between them, and asked, "Why did you take my mother away from my daughter?" Charles did not deny it. He looked at William and said there was something his son had never been told. The removal had wounded William, but Charles's refusal to call it a mistake suggested that Diana's heirlooms were tied to a secret far more dangerous than either man was prepared to admit. This was never only a disagreement over jewelry. For William, each heirloom carried the memory of a mother whose absence had shaped nearly every important moment of his life. For Charles, those same objects were tied to duty, regret, and decisions he had spent decades trying to control. Between them stood Charlotte, a child who had inherited Diana's name, public fascination, and now the burden of a private battle she did not yet understand. William had never seen the trust as a simple financial arrangement. The trust was a legal safeguard created to hold valuable possessions for Charlotte until she was old enough to receive them. But to him, it meant far more than ownership. He had told Catherine that each piece should be passed down slowly, with a story attached. Charlotte would learn when Diana wore it, why she treasured it, and what part of her life it carried. Charles saw danger where his son saw love. The king believed Diana's belongings had become part of royal history, carrying public meaning far beyond the family. Any future appearance by Charlotte in those pieces could shape headlines, expectations, and comparisons. To the monarch, protecting the crown sometimes meant controlling what remained private and what became a national symbol. Charlotte felt the tension before anyone explained it. During breakfast, she asked why William had cancelled an engagement and why every conversation stopped when she entered. He forced a smile, but Catherine noticed his hand tighten around the chair when the girl mentioned a photograph of Diana wearing the sapphire brooch. Catherine waited until Charlotte had left before confronting him. She told William that anger might expose the wrong, but it would not protect their daughter from the damage around it. He admitted he felt he had failed twice, once as Diana's son, and again as Charlotte's father. The princess reminded him that the child needed safety, not a victory won through another family war. Then William discovered something worse. The transfer order included 3 handwritten letters Diana had prepared for future grandchildren. These were not ceremonial objects or symbols of the crown. They were personal words, private messages, and pieces of a grandmother Charlotte would never meet. Charles had also approved a hidden restriction. Charlotte could not view the items until she turned 25 and received written permission from the reigning monarch, the sovereign holding the crown at that time. Even William could not guarantee her access. That evening, he paused outside Charlotte's room and heard her laughing with Catherine. He did not enter. He simply promised that his daughter would not inherit a family where love could be removed by signature. But before William challenged Charles again, he needed to know why the order existed at all, and the answer led back to one ceremony where Charlotte unknowingly became the center of a royal power struggle. The decision had not begun in a vault or inside a lawyer's office. It began 6 weeks earlier, during a private family ceremony at Windsor, when Charlotte was allowed to hold one of Diana's heirlooms for the first time. What should have been a tender introduction to her grandmother's memory became a moment of alarm. One remark, one unexpected photograph, and one private conversation after the doors closed pushed Charles toward the order William now considered unforgivable. Catherine had arranged the gathering as a quiet family moment. The ceremony was not official. It was simply a private introduction to objects being preserved for Charlotte's future. William placed Diana's pearl earrings beside a handwritten card and told his daughter that the pieces were not symbols of rank. They were reminders of love, loss, and the grandmother she would never meet. Charles arrived believing he was attending a routine inventory inspection. An inventory inspection is a formal check of valuable royal items to confirm where they are, who controls them, and how they are protected. The king immediately became uneasy when he saw Charlotte being personally connected to objects that already carried enormous public meaning. No palace guidance had been approved. No future rules had been agreed. Charlotte then lifted Diana's sapphire brooch and smiled. "Perhaps I could wear this when Papa becomes king," she said. A family photographer captured the moment before Charles sharply ordered the camera lowered. The girl froze, unsure what she had done wrong, while William tried to reassure her that everything was fine. Charles waited until Charlotte had left before confronting his son. He told William that the child was being placed inside a story she was too young to understand. The prince answered that teaching her about Diana was not political preparation. The king replied that Diana's image had never remained private, no matter how desperately the family had wanted it to. Then the mistake became dangerous. A junior communications officer uploaded the photograph to a restricted media folder, a private digital space where palace images are stored before possible release. The picture was deleted quickly, but several senior staff members had already seen it. Within hours, they were calling Charlotte the natural keeper of Diana's legacy. Charles received an even darker warning that night. The keeper of the royal collection, the official responsible for protecting historic royal objects, told him that Diana's heirlooms could one day be treated as symbols of royal continuity, rather than private family possessions. The king feared Charlotte might become the center of rival loyalties once William inherited the throne. Charles then ordered his private secretary to examine every object inside the trust. His final instruction was colder still. William must not be told until the review was complete and the heirlooms were already secured. The Windsor ceremony explained Charles's fear, but it could not excuse the secrecy. Once William learned that his father had deliberately shut him out, the dispute stopped being about inheritance and became a direct challenge to trust itself. The doors closed, the aides withdrew, and for several seconds neither man spoke. William stood across from Charles, not as an heir waiting for instruction, but as a son demanding an answer. Between them lay the signed order, Diana's inventory, and decades of unspoken grief. When the prince finally broke the silence, his voice remained controlled, but the accusation beneath it struck harder than shouting. He told the king that authority had crossed into betrayal. William placed the transfer order directly in front of his father and asked whether he understood what he had done. The document had removed Charlotte's legal entitlement, meaning her recognized right to receive the heirlooms when she reached the required age. Charles did not look away. The king said he had read every line and refused to hide behind advisors, secretaries, or palace officials. Charles then defended the decision with the cold logic of duty. Diana's heirlooms, he said, had become more than private possessions. They carried national importance and could one day be pulled into inheritance disputes, future marriages, commercial deals, or competing family claims. The monarch believed crown custody was the only way to stop those objects from becoming weapons against Charlotte. William rejected every word. He pushed the chair behind him aside and told Charles that the letters, pendant, and engraved bracelet were not state regalia. State regalia are ceremonial objects owned or controlled by the monarchy for official use. Diana's pieces were personal belongings, chosen and preserved for grandchildren she never lived to meet. Turning them into royal property did not protect her memory. It erased her intention. Charles accused his son of allowing grief to decide policy. William answered instantly. He said the king was using policy to avoid grief. The words struck deep. Charles lost his composure and warned him never to speak as though he alone had suffered after Diana's death. The prince replied that suffering did not give either of them the right to rewrite her wishes. Then Charles revealed the threat through a confidential memorandum delivered by the palace legal office. The memorandum, a written warning summarizing a possible claim, suggested that one of Diana's relatives might challenge the trust's ownership of certain personal objects. The king insisted he had moved the heirlooms to prevent legal seizure. William opened another page. The supposed challenge concerned only one bracelet. Nothing in the warning mentioned the letters, earrings, brooch, or pendant. Charles fell silent as his son exposed the contradiction. The legal threat had been used to justify a far wider removal. William told him that unless every item was restored, he would contest the order before the family council, a private gathering where senior relatives settle major disputes. Charles closed the file. Then you may discover who else wanted them removed. William had entered believing his father acted alone, but those final words revealed something darker. A hidden alliance inside the palace had turned fear into royal policy. Charles had signed the order, but he had not created it alone. The amendment had traveled through private offices, collection advisors, legal custodians, and one family consultation that William had never been told took place. As the prince traced the decision backward, he discovered that the removal had been presented to the king not as a choice, but as an emergency. Someone had convinced Charles that Charlotte's inheritance could become a threat to the future monarchy. William studied the amendment with Catherine beside him. The internal routing marked small official codes showing which offices handled a document, revealed that the proposal had not begun with Charlotte's trust administrator. It came from the Office of Royal Collections after a confidential consultation with Camilla. The discovery mattered because it proved the decision had been shaped inside the palace before Charles ever signed it. Camilla had been asked whether Diana's most recognizable heirlooms should remain private or enter a controlled historical collection. Her written response warned that powerful objects could disrupt future ceremonial planning if permanently assigned to one young royal. She believed Charlotte might one day be pushed into public comparisons with her grandmother, creating pressure around every appearance, every jewel, and every family decision. Charles confronted Camilla with the consultation summary in his hand. He asked why she had never told him that Diana's personal letters were included. The queen consort's confidence faded. She said the review had been presented to her as a question about jewelry and public use, not private messages written for grandchildren. Camilla remained alone after Charles left. She held the unsigned consultation copy and understood the danger instantly. Whatever her intention, William would see her words as another attempt to control Diana's memory. The public would see the same thing. Once again, she had been pulled into the shadow of a woman whose emotional place inside the monarchy had never disappeared. Then the deeper manipulation emerged. The keeper of the royal collection, the senior official responsible for preserving historically important royal objects, had expanded Camilla's recommendation. He added letters, the pendant, and lesser-known keepsakes, so nothing connected to Diana could ever leave palace control. Charles had approved the final amendment without noticing how far it went. Worse, the official inserted an urgency clause, allowing the heirlooms to be removed before William was informed. The supposed legal threat had justified the rush. Yet no court claim had ever been filed. Charles summoned the official and demanded the original signed warning. None could be produced. The king finally understood that his authority had been used to complete someone else's agenda, and William's charge of betrayal was no longer easy to dismiss. The hidden power behind the decision had been exposed, but exposure could not reverse the damage. The consequences were already moving beyond Charles, Camilla, and William, and they were about to reach Charlotte herself. The adults had tried to contain the conflict behind closed doors, but children often recognize loss before anyone explains it. Charlotte did not know about legal amendments or crown custody. She only knew that the small pendant she had once been promised was suddenly gone from the family inventory room. When she asked Catherine where it had been taken, the princess faced the choice every parent fears: protect a child with silence, or wound her with the truth. The fallout had already spread through the family. Charles suspended access to the trust vault while he reviewed the transfer, meaning no one could remove, inspect, or privately handle the stored heirlooms. William cancelled 2 public duties because he refused to pretend everything was normal. Catherine stayed close to Charlotte, while palace staff were ordered not to mention Diana's possessions around any of the children. Charlotte discovered the truth during a planned visit to choose a keepsake for a school history project. She opened the compartment where Diana's diamond pendant had rested and found only empty space. The inventory card was gone as well. She did not cry. She simply stared for a moment, then asked Catherine whether the pendant had been taken because of what she said at Windsor. Catherine knelt beside her daughter and chose every word carefully. She explained that the adults were arguing about where the objects should be protected and who should make decisions about them. The princess assured Charlotte that she had done nothing wrong. Still, the girl asked the question that cut deeper than blame. Then why does everyone become sad when I mention Grandmama? William entered as Charlotte quietly closed the case. She told him she did not need the pendant if keeping it caused fighting between him and Charles. The prince felt his anger collapse into guilt. His daughter was prepared to surrender something precious, simply to restore peace between her father and grandfather. Charlotte then revealed what she had kept. Before Diana's handwritten card was removed, she had copied one sentence into her notebook: "Jewels matter only when they carry love forward." William read the words twice. The child understood the inheritance more clearly than every adult fighting over control. The pieces mattered because they carried love, not because they carried power. Catherine later telephoned Charles privately and repeated Charlotte's words exactly. The king became silent. He ended the call, took the original amendment from his desk, and read it again. For the first time, the monarch no longer saw policy, protection, or royal authority. He saw the confusion his signature had placed inside his granddaughter. Charles then requested a private meeting with Charlotte, without officials, advisors, or lawyers. William hesitated, but Catherine told him the conflict could not end until the king faced the child affected by his decision. The argument had begun between 2 powerful men, yet its turning point would come from a young girl whose honesty forced Charles to choose between control and family. No advisors entered the room. No legal papers were opened. Charles sat opposite Charlotte, with only Diana's copied sentence resting between them. The king had prepared an explanation about preservation, responsibility, and the dangers attached to royal inheritance. Yet when his granddaughter looked at him, he abandoned the speech. She did not ask when the jewels would be returned. She asked whether her grandmother would have been angry that the family was fighting. Charlotte joined Charles in a small family sitting room, while William and Catherine waited elsewhere. The king offered her tea, but his hand stopped when she placed Diana's copied sentence on the table. The trust, a legal arrangement protecting property for someone until a set age, had become the center of the dispute. Yet the girl seemed far more concerned about the people involved than the possessions themselves. Charles explained the decision in the simplest words he could find. He told Charlotte that he had moved the heirlooms because he feared they could be taken, misused, or turned into public symbols that placed pressure on her. The monarch admitted that he had acted without speaking to William or Catherine. He had called it protection, but he now understood why the silence felt like betrayal. Charlotte listened without interrupting. She told Charles that she had never wanted the pieces because they were famous. She wanted them because William had said Diana touched them, wore them, and hoped they would remain inside the family. To her, the pendant and letters were not royal symbols. They were a way of knowing someone she had never met. Then Charlotte asked the question Charles had feared. Would Diana have trusted him to protect the collection? The king could not answer at once. He folded the copied message slowly and admitted that protecting something was not always the same as understanding what it meant. Charlotte offered a solution no advisor had considered. The heirlooms could remain secure while still belonging to her trust, with family approval required before any public use. That way, no one could exploit them. But Diana's intended inheritance would not be erased. Charles looked at his granddaughter and accepted responsibility. The removal had been his decision, he said, so the mistake was his to correct. He promised Charlotte that she would never be forced to wear the objects publicly and would never lose them simply because the monarchy feared their emotional power. After Charlotte left, Charles asked William to return alone. The prince entered and found the original amendment beside a fountain pen. This time, the king was not preparing to approve it. Charlotte had achieved what confrontation could not. She reminded Charles that legacy was not controlled by whoever held the crown, and the monarch was now ready to reverse the order before the entire country learned what had happened. The palace had hoped to resolve the matter privately, but secrecy collapsed before the new order could be signed. By sunrise, the removal of Diana's heirlooms dominated broadcasts, newspapers, and crowds gathering outside royal residences. To the public, this was no longer a technical dispute over inheritance. It became a test of whether Diana's memory belonged to the institution that once struggled to contain her, or to the children and grandchildren who carried her emotional legacy forward. William watched the morning coverage in silence. A national broadcaster had received the original inventory, showing that Charlotte's beneficiary rights had been withdrawn under Charles's authorization. Beneficiary rights are the legal rights allowing someone to receive property held for them in a trust. Palace communications staff confirmed that a review was underway, but they refused to explain or defend the transfer. The monarchy divided almost immediately. Some courtiers warned that reversing the order would weaken royal control over historically important objects. Others argued that allowing it to stand would make the crown look afraid of Diana's continuing influence. The dispute mattered because every decision now carried two meanings, one for the family and another for the institution. William kept watching until childhood photographs of Diana appeared beside a recent image of Charlotte. Then the presenter described the crisis as a battle between a grandfather and granddaughter. The prince switched off the television. He had challenged Charles to protect his daughter, not to place her at the center of a national argument. Charles refused the easiest escape. Advisors urged him to call the decision administrative, but the king instructed his communications secretary to state clearly that he had personally authorized it. The monarch knew accepting blame would expose his mistake, yet hiding behind officials would deepen the betrayal. Outside Kensington Palace, hundreds gathered carrying white roses. A newspaper front page showed an empty velvet jewelry case beneath the words, "Diana's legacy removed from Charlotte." One handwritten sign captured the public anger more sharply than any speech. A memory is not crown property. Yet the public did not know the reversal was already prepared. Charles had signed a restoration decree, an official order returning all 5 heirlooms and Diana's letters to Charlotte's trust. The new agreement added security safeguards, but removed the monarch's power to cancel her inheritance alone. Charles asked William, Catherine, and Charlotte to stand with him when the decision was announced. The prince agreed on one condition. The statement must admit that Diana's wishes had been wrongly overridden and were now being honored. The world had witnessed the monarchy's mistake, but the final judgment would depend on whether Charles could do more than return the heirlooms. He would have to restore the trust his signature had broken. The ending did not come through victory, humiliation, or another secret compromise. It came when Charles stood before his family and admitted that the crown had reached too far into something deeply personal. The heirlooms were returned, Charlotte's rights were restored, and Diana's letters were placed back inside the trust created for her granddaughter. Yet the true resolution was larger than jewelry. A king, a son, and a child finally agreed on where royal authority must end. Charles signed the restoration decree with William beside him. The decree, an official order reversing the earlier decision, returned every object under the original trust terms: the sapphire brooch, pearl earrings, engraved bracelet, diamond pendant, and Diana's handwritten letters. Nothing remained under permanent crown ownership. The king had finally accepted that protection did not give the monarchy the right to erase a personal inheritance. William read the revised trust before accepting it. Charlotte, her parents while she remained underage, and an independent family trustee, would now need to approve any public loan. A trustee is a neutral person responsible for protecting property for its rightful beneficiary. The crown could guard the heirlooms, insure them, and preserve them, but it could never again take control of them. Charles then apologized directly. The king admitted that fear of future controversy had caused him to treat family memory like a constitutional threat. He also confessed that keeping William outside the decision repeated the same silence that had damaged their relationship for years. This time, the monarch did not defend himself. He simply accepted the wound he had caused. William did not offer instant forgiveness. The prince told Charles that restoring the heirlooms corrected the legal wrong, but trust would return more slowly. Still, he accepted his father's apology and agreed on one truth: Charlotte would not carry the weight of grief that belonged to older generations. Charlotte entered when the family gathered again. Charles opened the restored case and handed her Diana's diamond pendant, not as a royal reward, but as proof that it belonged once more to her trust. She touched it briefly, then placed it beside her grandmother's card. Diana's letters remained sealed until the age specified in her instructions. Charles removed the clause requiring future royal approval, ensuring those words would reach the granddaughter for whom they had been preserved. William's confrontation had never been rebellion. It was a defense of the line between the crown and the human lives beneath it. Charles proved that royal authority becomes stronger when it admits a mistake. Charlotte reminded them that inheritance matters not because objects carry status, but because love must pass untouched from one generation to the next. Diana's heirlooms returned to Charlotte's trust. William stood beside his father without surrendering his principles, and Charles accepted the limit of his crown, bringing the confrontation to a complete, painful, and deeply human end. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.